Today I'm looking at a 2013 Honda Accord transmission interlock switch. If your car is approaching 60 to 70,000 miles, it indeed could be the switch. Before we get into the details, let's check a couple things just to make sure that it is indeed the transmission switch that needs to be replaced. First on my list of things that need to be checked is the battery. Ideally, I'd take it out of the car, but you can do this in the car as well. Just disconnect the ground wire. Make sure you charge the battery up fully, either with the alternator or with an external charger above at least 13 volts. After the battery is fully charged, disconnect the charger and or leave the ground wire disconnected. Then walk away for about 18 or 24 hours and come back and see how much the battery voltage has dropped. In my case, this is a good battery. Now, if the battery voltage drops down in the 12.4, 12.3 range, and you might have a bad battery, and it'd be a real good idea to have a professional check the battery for you before you proceed with the switch. Number two on my list of things to check, the alternator. You want to make sure it's up to snuff and doing exactly what it's supposed to do. My recommendation is connect up your voltmeter, start the car. You should see the alternator come in at least briefly and charge the battery back up. Then the voltage will drop way back, and it looks like the alternator is no longer charging the battery. Once the battery settles out at this lower voltage, the next thing to do is go ahead and turn on the headlights for the car. You should see the alternator jump back up and start charging the battery again. If the alternator does not come back on and start recharging the battery after the lights have been turned on, then it's definitely time to start taking a look at the alternator. Ideally, of course, it would stay on like most other vehicles, but Honda does things differently with load sensing circuitry. So the minute you turn the lights back off, the alternator is going to charge for a little bit longer and then turn itself back off and go back to straight battery voltage. Next on the list of things to check is the ignition switch. If you're approaching 65,000 miles or above, pretty good chance it's about time to replace it. They're about $35 to $70 available from your local parts store. I've got another video out there that gets into this in detail, so if it's time to replace the switch, you might want to take a look at that one. The fourth and final item on my preliminaries is the starter. I'm working on another video on rebuilding a Honda starter, but there are multiple brush sets available. The main one that's available on eBay is not the correct one for a 2013 Honda Accord. This is the one I bought, but I had to use parts from the old brush set to make it work on my starter. Time to get back and looking at servicing that transmission switch. First on my agenda is to disconnect the battery. And yes, I screwed up here. I should not disconnect the hot side before I disconnect the ground. It's always best to disconnect the ground first and reconnect it last. Now it's time to go ahead and remove the battery hold down clamp. You want to take a real good look at this clamp. Notice how it's lower on the front side than it is on the back. Before you remove the clamp, look down and see where the clamp hooks are hooked into. You want to make absolutely sure you get it hooked back in the same place. Note that the front hook goes down lower than the rear hook does. Now you can remove the battery cover, and lastly, of course, remove the battery. One special note on batteries here, the parts stores actually show a larger battery for this application. Apparently Honda released some Accords with a small battery and some Accords with a large battery. If you're having problems with battery life, it might be a good idea to investigate the larger battery. Now it's time to remove the battery tray. Notice you're taking it out that this does have two little locator tabs on the bottom of the tray. These need to go back in those two little holes I'm indicating here for the battery tray to sit correctly. Otherwise it won't sit all the way down. Now it's time to send the wife and the kids away, because you're definitely going to lose only your religion with this next step. There are two 10mm bolts that hold this thing in place, and you can't even see one of them. It's back in underneath the heater hoses. And I really can't get a camera in there to show it to you. What I'm pointing to now is the actual switch cover. Here's the actual switch after I've removed the two 10mm bolts and then put it around to remove the electrical connector. The electrical connector removes by lifting it up from the left side and pivoting back and then pulling the connector straight out. The selection shaft that is roughly in the center of the photo goes up into the black portion of the round cap. This is the top of the switch as would be installed. As you can see, it's slotted, so it'd probably be a good idea to mark the area around the 10mm bolts before you actually remove them so you can put the switch back exactly like it was. And here is the bottom side view of the still assembled switch. In this shot, I've already removed 4 of the 6 bolts. I'm going to take these last 2 bolts out and then flip the switch open. Note these switches are pretty expensive. The Honda place is wanting about $155 and was talking a week delivery, and O'Reilly's wasn't doing much better on the price, and the delivery was even worse. Now with the switch apart, what I'm looking for most is to make sure these spring-loaded contact points are still in good shape. The springs are not broken, and the tension on all 3 of them is pretty uniform. There shouldn't be extreme wear on the contact portion. A little scratching is okay. On the top side, we'll take a look and make sure that all these contact pads are in good shape. And probably I'll take it and go through them with a Dremel tool with a fine wire brush and just polish them out. If there's any burning on there, you need to make sure it's not pitted to the point where the switch couldn't make contact. One of the things you want to make sure that you do here is thoroughly polish out the pads on the spring-loaded contacts for the switch. This can definitely be where the problem is. My last piece of advice is to make absolutely sure that you know exactly where this was located. You want to make sure you put the switch back so it will engage the exact same way it did before. Well, yeah, that wraps this one up. I'm going to go ahead and put it back together and put it back in the car. There's nothing wrong with this switch. Hope you like my little switch tune-up. If you did, give me a like, and I'll see you on a future video.